Well, perhaps that's a myth that needs to be immediately debunked, that there are any kinds of health benefits associated with e-cigarettes. There aren't any. And here's the further truth in that is that just because you're not a smoker, that doesn't mean that you're completely not at risk, because secondhand smoke is a serious health hazard that claims the lives of many every year. Now, as we bring awareness to today, which is World Cancer Awareness Day, and encourage its prevention, early detection and treatment, we're joined this morning by consultant pulmonologist and head of smoking cessation at the Groote Schuur Hospital, Dr. Richard van Zyl-Smit, and he'll be telling us more about the dangers of e-cigarettes, secondhand smoking, and also answering the very big question: do they cause lung cancer? Doctor, thank you very much for joining us on this Tuesday morning.
It's a pleasure to be with you guys this morning.
I noticed you shaking your head quite a lot during that last little discussion there when people talk about the associations of health benefits and e-cigarettes, and we're going to get onto that, and I assume we're going to actually shift our perception quite dramatically there. But let's talk about secondhand smoke first of all. What exactly is secondhand smoke, and how can it affect us?
So the general concept of secondhand smoke is that it's smoke that you're not smoking directly yourself. So first-hand smoke is a cigarette, you're smoking it, you're a smoker. If I'm smoking, whatever you're breathing in is called secondhand smoke. And so, interestingly, it's a combination of both the smoke that you see coming off the cigarette, but also that which I've breathed in and breathed out. So it's the exposure to smoke that you didn't intend, as it were, to breathe. And commonly, it's spouses, partners, people in the house. Children is the other big risk. And then, as used to be, but no longer, thankfully, airlines and restaurants, all of that smoke was secondhand smoke.
Yeah. How long, realistically, does it take for secondhand smoke to start having an effect on the non-smoker?
It's instantaneous. You've walked into a restaurant, you would have seen someone smoking, you would have smelt it, you would have breathed it.
So by that time, when you smell it, it's already in?
Absolutely. Your lungs are designed to clear out pollution. It's part of air pollution that we consider from cars and traffic. It's the same format, as it were. And so the acute risks are right there. Yes, they're likely to be small compared to you sucking on the cigarette yourself, but they're not without risk.
What are those risks? How dangerous can it be?
So we start really from secondhand. You forget about secondhand is in utero fetus, baby growing, mom smoking. And so there are risks to the unborn child of coming out small, sudden infant death syndrome, which is obviously a catastrophic event, has been linked to it. Young children, increased risk of ear infections, chest infections, and then in adulthood, increased risk of cardiovascular disease and cancer in relation to somebody else providing you with your smoke.
Yeah. Talk to me quickly. I've heard some people saying that secondhand smoke is more dangerous than first-hand smoke. Is that a myth, or is that true?
It's always difficult to say, is it more dangerous or not? There are more people dying from cancer from first-hand smoke than second-hand. So you can't be exposed to as much second-hand smoke generally as you can to first-hand. So it is with risk. Is it more dangerous? Probably not, just because you can't get as much volume in. And when it comes to cancer risk, it's always about volume and exposure. The more you're exposed to, the higher your risks.
I suppose it's pervasive as well, because you don't know that you're taking it in. Very often you're not aware that it's not by choice.
Absolutely. And then for the researchers, it's much more difficult to quantify. You know that you're a 20-a-day smoker, so I can quantify 20 a day for 20 years. If you're in a building, in a house, you don't know how many cigarettes you're exposed to. So purely from a research point of view, it's actually more tricky to do that association.
Wow. All right, so there's a lot for us to delve into, and I'm sure that you have many questions as well, especially in reflection of our previous story in the tech news about how people are drifting towards e-cigarettes. Maybe you might have some questions about the dangers there are, some of the misconceptions and myths that surround vaping and e-cigarettes and smoking in general. Do pass those questions over to us. Expresso Morning Show, SABC3. That's where you can find us on Facebook. And we have the doctors in the house to answer all of those questions for you, which we will do after a short break.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. You're live with Expresso and rejoining a very important conversation as we obviously take note of today being World Cancer Awareness Day, and in particular looking at the effects of smoking and e-cigarettes, vaping, and this morning on second-hand smoke and what that effect can have on our general health, and for those who are unwittingly taking it in, because that is, I think, at the heart of second-hand smoking. We're joined by Dr. Darren Green and Dr. van Zyl-Smit. Docs, our friend in medicine.
Yes.
Dr. Darren Green, welcome back, buddy.
Morning, guys.
After much traffic this morning, thanks
good to be here.
making your way
You don't look
here.
stressed out at all, man.
Right. Promise I wasn't vaping in the car on the way here.
The plumes of smoke coming out of cars.
While we focus our attention on second-hand smoking, can we quickly just even sharpen that focus some more and focus on what it means to children and the health of children, second-hand smoking, because, I mean, obviously their systems and their bodies are still developing. So at that young age, to be taking on second-hand smoke, how dangerous is it, and what are the dangers that we are talking about in that respect?
Absolutely. Well, I heard you speak just before on intrauterine effects already with growth retardation and that kind of thing.
Absolutely. And I think for the growing child, the lungs are still developing. So until you hit 12 or 14, your lungs are actually still growing. So the risks of purely just lung growth is a concern. And also just immune effects. The secondhand smoke affects your body's ability to fight infection.
Absolutely.
And so the risk for ear infections, for chest infections are dramatically increased. And then again, they're cancer-causing drugs, and so you're not going to get cancer in children necessarily from exposure, but it's the start of a long-term exposure growing up in and around people who smoke. And so interestingly, the law itself actually says, although it's difficult to enforce, that if you're under the age of 12, you're not allowed to smoke in the car with someone under the age of 12. Now, difficult to police, but that's how the law has, how seriously they've taken
illegal.
this.
Yeah.
It's not allowed to smoke, you're not allowed to smoke in any childcare facilities where children are around, schools are all smoke-free. So the law has taken notice of the medical effects and put those things in place.
And the physiology obviously changes as well with them being exposed at that age.
Yeah.
The thickness of the mucus in terms of the inhalation of the second-hand smoke. And that then leads to a myriad of different medical conditions that predispose you to infection and other lung function issues. But anyway,
Let's talk about and expand on the relationship between cancer and secondhand smoke. Can, as an adult, after prolonged exposure to secondhand smoke, can you get cancer?
Yes. We both,
Wow,
yes.
boom. Yeah.
The estimated risk is something like 20 or 30% higher chance of getting cancer if you're a non-smoker exposed to secondhand smoke. Now remember, not all cancers are caused by cigarette, but around 90% of lung cancer is smoking related. So there's absolutely no question that exposure to secondhand smoke, which is a cancer-causing compound, causes cancer.
There's one thing I must throw in there, and that's tertiary smoke, tertiary exposure. So we all speak about second-hand, but third-hand is also there, and that's when you have the residue of the smoke forming a layer on your countertops, on your curtains, and all that kind of thing in your home, and then you ingest them, obviously, with your food and with touching the surfaces and licking your hands, for example, as well. And that's something that we don't often talk about.
Carcinogens there present.
So short of being a Tyrone and walking around slapping cigarettes out of people's hands, which would get into a lot of trouble, what are the ways in which you can protect yourself from secondhand smoke?
I think choose your friends wisely and where you socialise. I think you can be friends with lots of smokers, obviously, but I think the motive behind the conversation must really be to respect and do no harm to the people that you actually care about, and be considerate to the community and yourself, obviously. But really.
And certainly the smokers that I'm counselling in our clinic, the big challenge is who owns the house, for example. So if you own the house, you can lay down the law to say you may smoke only outside. If you're a boarder or you don't own the house, your ability to protect your environment is that much more difficult. But certainly if you have the authority in your space, and you do legally in terms of when you're at restaurants and outside, you actually are allowed to, if you really want to go that far, go to the police station and lay a charge against a restaurant that's allowing illegal smoking. So you not smack the cigarette out the hand, but certainly you can lay a criminal case because it's illegal. And where you have influence, you can ask the smokers to smoke outside or only a single room in the house, for example, is not a bad way of protecting everybody else with it's not, in a sense, completely ostracizing the smoker.
You can work on that super judgmental stare when someone is smoking in the presence of your child. In light of several deaths being linked to e-cigarettes and vaping in the US, we're going to get into the dangers and some of the myths that need to be debunked around e-cigarettes and vaping when we continue.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Thank you so much for that incredible performance. Hopefully you enjoyed it as much as we did. Robin Peters and his team are going to stick around for more love-inspired performances, but not spreading too much love at the moment, obviously in light of Cancer Awareness Day, focusing on cancer-causing smoking. And the USA recently had an outbreak of vaping-related illnesses that were linked to several deaths around the country and thousands of cases of lung injury. And Dr. Darren Green and Dr. van Zyl now share some more insights into e-cigarettes and the effects of vaping, not the healthy alternative.
Yeah.
Not.
Let's quickly debunk that myth very, very quickly. Or before we even get into that, how does e-cigarettes work?
So e-cigarette originally was a very simple device. Battery, heating coil, and liquid. And they looked like cigarettes, hence electronic cigarette. Nowadays, it's a computer with a superheating coil and a pod that you can add whatever you wish to. So it's changed from a simple device to a far more complicated, technologically advanced electronic nicotine delivery system. So it's no longer a cigarette, it's a nicotine delivery system.
Okay. How safe is it?
The question always comes up, and the question always gets answered, it depends.
Okay.
Compared to fresh air, they are definitely worse. Compared to a tobacco cigarette, where you have a 50% chance of dying prematurely, they are likely to be safer. And that's where I get into trouble as an academic researcher, where people start getting into big arguments as to how much safer are e-cigarettes compared to tobacco smoke. Is a very different question to, are they safe for a teenager, for an adolescent, for you as a non-smoker, should you start using them? It's a very different argument and discussion.
We heard a rather terrifying statistic earlier that 1 in 3 school-going teenagers are now vaping or using e-cigarettes.
Absolutely.
Are they useful in helping people to stop smoking, or is it the same thing?
So the answer is yes and no, I'm afraid. Smoking is very difficult the habit is difficult to break. And so that was always the sort of holy grail, was that e-cigarettes would be a very helpful device. It mimics the hand movement, the tactile element to smoking.
The drawing, the pulling of a cigarette.
And so they have proven to be far less helpful than we had expected. The evidence is not very strong. But then again, however you quit, you quit. And so singing a song every morning might help you quit smoking. There may be no evidence to do that. But if it helps you, well, then it's worth trying.
It is quite an individual process.
So should we use them? Do we use them? Are they widely used in smoking cessation? Not really. The UK tend to be more proactive in terms of using them to help people quit. US, South Africa, we are not that excited as an option. But if you said to me, look, I'm desperate to try stop smoking, could I try an e-cigarette? The answer is absolutely. It's worth a try, but it should be a stepping stone to fresh air.
Absolute
Not
cessation.
I'm going to switch to e-cigarettes and stay there. I would argue that it should be a stepping stone. It may work, it may not, but that's the challenge of quitting cigarettes.
One thing that I think we maybe might have skipped over, I mean, we've gone from tobacco cigarettes to e-cigarettes, but kind of like the middleman, if that's a manner of phrasing it that way, but the hookah. The shisha, the
hookah pipe.
The hookah. In Dubai, they call it hookah.
Oh, and you know that suddenly people have gone,
hello. What? Because it's quite commonly used. So, and I saw you shaking your head, Doctor.
How dangerous is a hookah pipe?
So,
let's talk about
hookah
that.
pipe is tobacco. So it's tobacco that's burnt through, usually with a coal heating underneath. The fact that it's bubbled through water is completely irrelevant. The volume of smoke that you get in a hookah session is several thousand litres. It's as dangerous in terms of the chemical exposure. The same chemicals in your cigarette are in a hookah pipe. And then there are these really other little weird things like herpes. When you're handing
Using
your
the pipe,
mouthpiece around.
And here I thought it was the cooler option. Come on.
Spreading the love.
Spreading the love, handing the pipe around. TB has been linked in terms of coughing in the same room, and so...
Oh, my
No,
goodness.
it's hookah is the same as tobacco. It should be seen as a tobacco product. It should be registered and regulated as a tobacco product, but it has this mystical, Eastern, politically correct, socially acceptable kind of thing. Absolutely not.
Word of advice, start with the herpes next time if you want to get that cessation conversation going, you know?
And then the secondary effects of that too, obviously, being in the room with the hookah. Exactly the same.
All right. Listen, I'm sure you have many, many questions to ask us regarding this topic. Please send them through to us, Expresso Morning Show, SABC3 on Facebook. We've got a post there, so just hit us up with a comment or a post or a question, and we'd love to have the doctors answer it for you.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
So, loving having the doctors here to really dissect e-cigarettes and vaping this morning. Obviously, being World Cancer Awareness Day, it gives us an opportunity to investigate some of the causes of cancer, with smoking being a massive contributor. But we've been looking at the link between vaping and e-cigarettes and cancer and the myriad of other sort of health effects. And we've been asking you guys to weigh in with your comments or questions, and we got a couple.
Yeah, so you have. So Caroline Bock-Shorley says, what about secondhand smoke from people smoking virtually at the doors of malls? I mean, we have to walk past these people on the way into the doors.
I'm picturing her judgmental face. She's got the judgmental face on.
Relevant there, but I guess the same applies here. And so what can people do then? Is it a matter of calling security? As you said, there is a law that forbids you from smoking.
That's the one place where the law is less than optimal at the moment. The legislation is promulgated, I think is the right word, hasn't been signed off, this 10-metre rule. So it isn't enforced as yet, but there will be a 5 or 10-metre rule saying you may not smoke within the entrance of a building.
Is that enough?
It probably is enough to get you away. But the other rule that's important is that you may not smoke if you can't see blue sky above you. And so if they're smoking under the entrance, that's illegal in itself rather than being 10 metres.
Okay.
But that 10 metres away from a door is coming when the law finally comes through, and will prevent people from smoking at entrances.
Yeah. Another question here came in from Tabang, who says, I'm addicted to hookah pipes, and every time when I start to smoke, my heart will beat faster than normal rate, and I'll start shaking too. Is this one of the side effects?
Yeah, certainly. So, I mean, obviously, when you take a hit of nicotine or tobacco, firstly, that's also one of the normal physiological responses, an increased heart rate. But we do find quite often, and in the emergency room, I've seen many people that when there are resins combined with the products that they're actually using, you can get tachyarrhythmias, in other words, very fast pulse rates, and people then can feel, obviously, the associated anxiety with those palpitations and fast heart rhythms.
And is that dangerous?
Yeah, well, those rhythms can accelerate to a degree where they put you at risk of developing, obviously, other symptoms, and where they can progress into deadly heart rhythms. So we have what's called an SVT, which is what's called a supraventricular tachycardia, and if not treated, that could be fatal as well.
Wow.
And herpes, buddy.
Oh, yes.
Let's once again, bringing it back, and thank you so much for your comments, guys, or your questions. We released information about deaths related to vaping in the US. I suppose there's not a huge amount, because it's so new, there's not a huge amount of medical research around vaping and e-cigarettes. Is it starting to emerge that they are relating deaths specifically to vaping or to e-cigarettes?
So I think the answer is yes, there are specific deaths related to vaping. The problem from a research and sort of CSI point of view to try and work out what's going on is that they're fairly random, and it's US-based. If you look at the number of deaths, it is predominantly happening in the US. We haven't seen it in the UK. And as best I think the evidence at the moment, it's related to contaminants, products that are being mixed at home, or some of the additional things that are ending up in the vaping products themselves, which doesn't seem to be happening in many other places. So it's a challenging space just because it's not the same person going down the same street being hit by the same car.
And some of them might have been smokers before
random.
that. I mean,
absolutely.
there's so many contributing factors,
Earlier on, Dr. Darren Green dropped the bomb on us, popcorn lung.
Don't.
Tell me
We
about
were asking
that.
about the injuries involved with vaping and e-cigarettes, and we were having a nice discussion in the break about popcorn lung, and it's actually not what you think it is. But Richard has got some more info on that for us.
So popcorn lung is it's a fascinating medical story, and that workers in popcorn factories. So it's got nothing to do with the lungs. It's popcorn workers. We're mixing your butter flavor. We're basically pouring the butter flavor into the popcorn. And acetyl, the flavorant in butter, was resulting in a very dangerous lung disease called bronchiolitis obliterans, where basically your lungs just fall apart, related to the popcorn flavorant. And this is a classic sort of CSI thing where CDC came in, worked out what the flavorant was. So that's popcorn lung. But where it comes to vaping now is that the same butter flavor, the acetyl chemical, is now appearing in e-cigarettes. So the concern is that maybe we will see popcorn lung again
emerging,
because of the exposure to the flavorant.
Yeah.
I suppose.
Can I still put butter on my popcorn at
Just don't
movies?
breathe it in.
That's the amazing thing with e-cigarettes, is that we assume that because you can eat it, you can breathe it. And so all the flavorants that are in cinnamon, butter flavor are fine to be eaten. But when you heat them and breathe them in, we see amazingly dramatic effects. So cinnamon, for example, is one particular flavorant that's particularly toxic to your lungs heated, but you will not, apart from the sugar hit from your cinnamon bun, suffer any other respiratory effects.
Sure. All right.
Lots to chew on. Thank you, gents. Yeah.
Absolutely. You can follow Dr. Richard van Zyl-Smit on social media at RVZ-Smit, right? RVZ-Smit, and of course at Dr. Darren Green on social media if you have any more questions. Thank you very much, doctors.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.